The cowboy had always been alone. He rode through the dusty trails of the prairie, his horse carrying him from one quiet town to another, yet he felt no belonging anywhere. Nights were the hardest. The stars stretched endlessly over the plains, beautiful but cold, and the wind whispered through the tall grass like a voice he could not understand. He missed company, though he would never admit it. People were complicated, and he had long learned to trust only himself. One afternoon, while riding past a small town at the edge of the map, he noticed a sign nailed crookedly to a post. The paint had faded, but the words were clear enough. "Town for sale, $200. He blinked, certain he had read it wrong. A whole town for just $200? Curiosity prickled his mind, and he guided his horse toward the town. The town lay in silence. Dust curled along the streets in the warm wind, carrying the scent of dry wood and long-forgotten meals. Buildings leaned awkwardly, their paint peeled and windows cracked. The saloon's door hung on a single hinge, creaking slightly with each whisper of wind. The cowboy felt a strange pull, a mixture of wonder and unease. He imagined himself walking these streets at dawn, a quiet king of this forgotten place, free from judgment, free from intrusion. He rode slowly, exploring the empty streets. The post office sagged, its roof half collapsed. The general store still had a few shelves, but the wood was warped and the glass of the windows shimmered with dust. He could see the faint outline of old wallpaper inside, faded to a soft beige. A wind bell above the doorway of the church jingled gently, and he paused, listening to the sound echo through the quiet. For a moment, he felt that the town was watching him. As he walked toward the center of town, he noticed small signs of life that made his pulse quicken. A trail of footprints led away from the main street, fading into the dry grass. Smoke curled in the distance, thin and tentative. Someone was here. His horse neighed softly, as if sensing the tension. He dismounted and moved cautiously, hand resting on the holster of his old revolver, though he hoped he would not need it. Following the smoke, he reached a small cabin at the edge of town. Its roof was patched with tin and the walls bore scratches and weathered wood, but it seemed sturdy. Outside, a small garden grew in uneven rows, evidence of care and attention. He froze. There was someone living here. A woman stepped out of the cabin. Her hair was pulled back tightly and her hands were rough from work. She looked at him with wary eyes. Beside her, 3 children peered out from behind the doorway, clutching each other nervously. The cowboy's chest tightened. He had expected solitude, but he found a family, fragile and exposed. "Who are you?" the woman asked, her voice steady but cautious. She stood protectively in front of the children. "Name's Jack," he said, keeping his tone calm. "I bought this town." The words hung in the air. The woman blinked, disbelief crossing her face. "Bought this town, you mean? This place isn't abandoned." Jack shook his head. "Not anymore, it seems." He felt a mixture of embarrassment and unease. He had imagined quiet streets, no neighbors, no responsibilities. Instead, he found a family trying to survive, clinging to what little they had. The woman said nothing at first. She studied him carefully, taking in the worn leather of his jacket, the dust on his boots, and the steady calm in his gaze. "I'm Mary," she finally said. "These are my children, Emma, Tom, and little Lucy." Jack nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said. I thought I'd be alone here." Mary's expression softened slightly. "Alone, huh? That's what I thought this town would be too, but we have nowhere else to go." She gestured toward the cabin. "We've been living here since the fire destroyed our home. It's not much, but it's safe." Jack's mind raced. He could leave, turn his horse around, and claim the town as his own, ignoring the family entirely. But something held him back. There was a resilience in Mary's stance, in the way the children clung to her side. It was more than survival, it was courage. And somehow it stirred something in him he had thought long dead. A sense of responsibility. Of connection. For a long moment they simply stared at each other, 2 lives colliding unexpectedly. Finally, Jack spoke. "I didn't know anyone lived here. I'll leave if you want." Mary shook her head. "No, you're here now. We'll manage. But don't expect it to be easy." He nodded, understanding the unspoken meaning. Living in a town, even one barely standing, meant work, effort, and patience. He had bought this town for solitude, but it seemed fate had a different plan. Over the next few hours, Jack walked through the town again, this time noticing the details he had missed before. The schoolhouse had broken windows, but the door still stood strong. The barn had missing boards, yet it could shelter livestock. The water pump at the edge of town squeaked, but water still flowed. The town was tired, weathered, but not hopeless. Jack returned to the cabin carrying a small bundle of supplies he had in his saddlebag. He placed them on the porch. "I brought some things you might need," he said, keeping his voice neutral. Mary gave him a cautious look but nodded in thanks. The children peeked out from behind her, curiosity replacing fear. Evening came and the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the empty streets. Jack mounted his horse and rode slowly, circling the town. It was strange seeing it bathed in gold and red light. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was alive with potential. Perhaps this place could become something more than a ghost town. Perhaps it could become home. But first he would have to decide. He could stay, helping Mary and her children, or he could leave and preserve the solitude he had sought for so long. The choice was not easy. He had bought a town expecting freedom, but he had found responsibility, family, and a future he had not imagined. As the night fell and stars sparkled above the quiet town, Jack sat outside his cabin, listening to the soft breathing of the children inside and the distant howl of a coyote. He realized that loneliness could be replaced by connection if one had courage. He was not ready to make promises yet, but he knew one thing. The town was no longer just his. It belonged to all of them now. Even if they did not yet realize it, the wind whispered through the empty streets again, but this time it felt different, almost welcoming. Jack leaned back against the rough wood of the cabin, feeling for the first time in years that he might have found a place to belong. He did not know what the next day would bring, but he knew he could not leave Mary and her children. Somehow the town had become alive again, not with buildings or with money, but with hope. And as the moon rose over the quiet prairie, Jack made a silent promise to himself. He would stay, he would help, and he would face whatever challenges came with this unexpected life. The town was not just a purchase anymore. It was a chance for all of them to start again. The next morning, the cowboy woke to the soft sounds of life in the cabin. The children were stirring, their small feet padding across the wooden floor, and Mary was already outside tending to her garden. The sun had not yet climbed high, but its warm light bathed the town in gold. Jack watched for a moment, feeling an unfamiliar sense of peace. For the first time, he was not alone, and somehow that felt right. He dismounted and approached Mary, who looked up from her work with a tired but cautious smile. "Morning," Jack said, tipping his hat. "Morning," Mary replied. "Coffee's nearly ready if you want some." Jack nodded and followed her inside. The cabin was simple but functional. A small table held a few mugs and a kettle, the smell of coffee already drifting through the air. The children sat quietly, eyes wide as they watched him. They were learning to trust him slowly, each movement measured, each word considered. They ate together, and for a few moments, the past and the hardships of life outside the town seemed far away. Jack felt something warm in his chest, a sense of belonging, fragile but growing. It was strange, he thought, how a town he had bought for solitude had given him this feeling instead. After breakfast, Jack and Mary stepped outside together. "I was thinking," Jack said, "we should start fixing some of the buildings. The town's got good bones, but it's tired." Mary nodded. "I agree. The children can help in small ways too. It'll teach them something, and it'll give us all a sense of purpose." Jack felt a smile tug at his lips. "I didn't expect to have purpose when I bought this town, but it looks like I do now." They began with the barn at the edge of the town. The wood was old and warped, but with care it could be restored. Jack and Mary worked side by side, hammering boards into place and tightening hinges. The children ran small errands, carrying nails, fetching water, sweeping the dirt floors, and their laughter began to fill the empty streets. As the days passed, the town slowly came to life. Windows were repaired, doors painted, and the streets cleared of debris. Jack took pride in his work, not just because the town looked better, but because he was part of something greater than himself. Mary was strong and patient, guiding the children and showing Jack the ways to care for the land and the buildings. Evenings were spent around the fire. Jack learned about Mary's life before the fire, about her late husband who had loved her deeply, and about the struggle of raising children alone. She spoke with honesty, her words never bitter, only real. The cowboy listened, sharing stories of his own lonely life on the prairie. Slowly, trust grew between them. silent and steady like the rhythm of the wind. One day, while repairing the roof of the schoolhouse, Jack paused to look over the town. The sun glinted off the windows and the streets no longer felt empty. He saw Emma and Tom playing near the well, Lucy chasing a stray chicken and Mary tending her garden with a quiet smile. The town was not just a place, it was alive again, and he had a hand in its rebirth. Word spread to nearby settlements about the cowboy and the widow living in the abandoned town. Some people were skeptical, others curious, but few understood the quiet life they were building. A neighboring rancher rode by one afternoon, tipping his hat with a mixture of surprise and respect. "I didn't think anyone could make that place livable again," he said. Jack simply nodded. "We're making it home." Life in the town was not without challenges. A broken water pump, a sudden storm, and the need to fix the church roof tested their patience and resolve, but each obstacle was met with determination. Jack learned the rhythm of teamwork, how to combine his strength with Mary's resourcefulness, how to encourage the children while teaching them responsibility. Slowly, they created a routine, a structure that gave each of them stability and hope. One evening after a long day of work, Jack and Mary sat outside on the porch of their cabin. The sky was painted with colors of pink and orange, and a cool breeze swept through the streets. "I never thought I'd find a life like this," Jack said quietly. Mary looked at him, her eyes soft. "Neither did I, but it's what we make of it. The town gave us a chance, but we give it life." Jack nodded. He realized that the $200 he had spent on the town was nothing compared to the value it had given him. Purpose, friendship, and a family he had not expected to find. The children ran to them, holding small bundles of flowers they had picked from the fields. Lucy tumbled forward, laughing, while Tom and Emma followed with shy smiles. Jack and Mary shared a quiet look, understanding without words the growth that had come to all of them. Weeks turned into months, and the town flourished in small but meaningful ways. Crops grew in the garden, the barn held livestock, and the once abandoned streets were filled with the sounds of life. Jack had become not just a cowboy wandering the prairie, but a protector and guide. Mary's strength and kindness had softened his solitude, and the children had brought joy he had forgotten existed. Jack spent quiet mornings riding around the outskirts, checking fences and surveying the land. Each evening he returned to the cabin, greeted by laughter and warmth. The town was not perfect, but it was theirs, built on effort, care, and an unexpected bond. The cowboy and the widow learned from each other in countless ways. Mary taught Jack the patience needed to nurture both land and life, while Jack showed Mary how to face challenges head-on, with courage and resilience. Together they created routines, repaired what was broken, and slowly rebuilt not just the town but their own hearts. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves began to turn golden and the air carried a crisp chill, Jack watched the children play near the barn. He realized how far they had come. The town was no longer a ghost town. It was a home alive with hope, laughter, and purpose. He felt pride in the quiet, steady way they had created life where there had been emptiness. Mary approached, carrying a basket of vegetables from the garden. "The children want to cook tonight," she said with a smile. "They're trying to make a stew from our harvest," Jack chuckled. "Then we better help them. I'd hate to waste such hard work." As they prepared the meal together, the cowboy noticed the subtle changes in himself. The loneliness he had carried for so long had lifted, replaced by a sense of connection he had thought impossible. The town, the widow, and her children had given him something more valuable than solitude. He had found a place to belong. Night fell over the town, and the stars stretched endlessly across the prairie. Jack stood outside, listening to the soft breathing of the children in the cabin and the gentle murmur of the wind. The town, once silent and empty, was alive with life, care, and promise. He knew challenges would come, storms would test them, and hard work would continue. But he also knew they were no longer alone. The cowboy had entered the town seeking solitude, but he found something better, a family, a purpose, and a life worth living. And as he looked at Mary and the children playing in the fading light, he understood that this town, bought for $200, had given him a fortune beyond measure, friendship, hope, and a home. Jack smiled quietly to himself, feeling the warmth of the fire inside the cabin and the cool breeze outside. The town had taught him something important. Life's value was not in what one owned, but in what one nurtured, shared, and built together. And in this small town on the edge of the prairie, a lonely cowboy had found a life he would never let go.